And here is our host, Tian Wei.
Hello and welcome to World Insight on CGTN. Today, let's dive deep into China-U.S. ties in our special program. To ease the ongoing trade war between the two world's largest economies, they are finally preparing to sign a Phase 1 deal this week. What's the significance and impact of the deal, and how to evaluate, in general, the current status and potential of China-U.S. relations? So in our special edition today, we will bring you the insights of some renowned Chinese scholars. Let's begin with Yuan Peng, president of the China Institute of Contemporary International Relations. He says he's cautiously optimistic about the deal and says, well, it may pause the trade war, it cannot stop the growing competition between China and the U.S. Take a listen. Phase 1, China-U.S. economic and trade negotiations. What's likely to be the time of maneuvering provided by both sides?
I think it's a good news for the pause of U.S.-China trade serious competition. But however, I think even if we have a Phase 1 trade deal, but maybe the next day we're entering into the Phase 2, Phase 3. So this not necessarily means we won't have any more serious competition. For example, the high-tech competition may be even harder. Because recent news suggested that American will have more actions on struggling against Chinese high-tech.
We already understand that since the 6th of this month, January, the exports of AI technologies from the U.S. to China directly has already been banned, quote-unquote, by the U.S. side. So what does that mean to the sentiment here and the discussion of nature of U.S.-China relations from this incident and many others we are seeing day by day?
It's not a pure trade war. At the very beginning, the war means two more substantial aspects. One is the high-tech. The second is the Chinese model, Chinese development model. So it's a go beyond just trade, which means the target of this trade war is not trade per se, but the Chinese development model, which means without achieving this goal, this kind of competition will last long. So recently we see lots of actions on Chinese high-tech, on Huawei, on ZTE, and this struggle will continue. And without achieving the final goal, I doubt that maybe America will take use of every means they can use to hedge against China. For example, Hong Kong issue, Taiwan issue, Xinjiang issue, human rights issue, and Tibetan issues. So many issues still there. So I still have no reason to be optimistic in 2020.
As you may know, some scholars have advised to separate the two kinds of issues. One is more geopolitical, the other is trade and economic issues. However, Professor Yuan, we have also noticed there is a mixture of them from the U.S. side because the latter believe it is to their strategic advantage to do that. So from China's perspective, what to do about this?
Yeah, number one, I think it's very hard to separate political issue and economic issue. And it's very hard because if you read NSC report by Donald Trump administration, if you read different series of speeches by American high-level officials, you can see they have a whole of government China policy, which means they combine all means and resources against the rising of China. So strategically, it's very hard to separate. But for me to see technically, we still should work hard to separate.
But Professor Yuan, as you may know, over the past year or so, China has been trying to deal with many of the issues you just mentioned, Hong Kong and likely Taiwan and Xinjiang, as well as Tibet, human rights. A lot of these issues, China believes in its own way of doing things, while the rest of the world still need time to catch up in order to understand China's way and also to have sufficient communication about that. So what's likely to be the near potential of these issues? Will they still boiling as you see it? And how much will that have an impact on the ongoing strength showcase between China and the United States?
If you trace U.S.-China relations in a longer history, for example, if you trace the U.S.-China relations in 40 years from the normalization, you can see that all those issues you mentioned always there. On Taiwan, Tibet and human rights, arms control sorts of issues always there. But originally, we are fortunate that we have many channels, mechanism between the two countries. So different ministry, different officials can deal with different issues by their own. But today the problem is that those issues remain still there, but with lack of channels. So we have only trade negotiation team, which is more visible.
Yeah.
It's very hard to see any other channels.
Do you think there's going to be tremendous danger as a result of this?
Of course, because we are two major powers with so many issues and problems between us. So the experiences in the past 40 years tells us that problems is not so dangerous if we have channels to have a daily-based dialogue or weekly-based or monthly-based. But the danger today is that because no routine works on daily-based dialogues, then make those issues maybe out of control. Then this is the origin of the dangers. So my suggestion to the bilateral relations, in particular to American administration, is that we need to resume the dialogues, at least the 4 dialogues which was both agreed in the Monterrey, between President Xi and President Trump. Today, the reality is that only the trade and the economic dialogue, the other 3 seems not that active. So we need to resume all those dialogues.
But you understand this is the election year in the U.S., right?
If U.S.-China relations going bad or even going worse, I don't think it's a good news for Donald Trump to win the election. So for him, I still think maintain the peace and stability, even for the consideration of the election, matters. So I think maybe both sides need to revitalize all those dialogues.
I see. Professor Yuan, this is the U.S. election year. With such an unpredictability of the bilateral relations right now, is China ready to handle some of the unprecedented situations?
Because today we are facing the unprecedented changes in 100 years, as President Xi mentioned many times. Because every day there is some breaking news.
Every hour, as we
every
speak
hour.
now.
Yeah, maybe after our interview, maybe something happened. So the worst scenario, preparation is a must for the governments, not only in China, but for elsewhere in the world.
What about for China and the U.S.? What's the worst scenario, do you think?
I think U.S.-China worst scenario is some accidental, conflict militarily, because this is rose the nationalism in both sides. It's very hard to manage.
Now, recently, there's also the U.S.-Iranian crisis, apparently. Where do you think it is going? Do you think China and the U.S. will be able to have further opportunities to work on something together as a result of the current unpredictability?
The Iranian nuclear issues. The best way is still that the U.S. and China working together with the European, Russian countries. This maybe provide some new opportunity for U.S. and China to cooperate. Anytime when U.S. and China working together in dealing with other issues beyond the bilateral, then bilateral relations will getting much better. This is a historical experience.
Professor Yang, on the other hand, there seems to be, as some suggest, a competition about setting up the international standard in a way. We see U.S. try to withdraw from various kinds of international mechanisms and treaties, and also creating further escalation of challenges for WTO, for example, with the appellate body. We have also seen the recent practice of assassinating a foreign leader. So, Professor Yang, all of this have invited the international debates, if not criticism, against the United States. So, where is China and where is the United States? Is this going to be an area of competition or an area of cooperation?
We have a wait list almost 70 years of peace and stability in the world after World War II. This is thanks to the cooperation between the 5 countries. But today, it's in the turning point of the old norms and the new norms. In particular, now we're entering a digital era. Something very new need to be rethought. So it's a good idea for U.S. and China and other countries sitting down together to discuss what's new in today's new world and what kind of norms need to be remained, what new norms, for example, dealing with the internet or digital, need to be reestablished, what areas need to be reformed. This is the only way to save the world. Otherwise, a world without any international common norms is really dangerous.
The think tank that you're heading, Kicker, is celebrating the 40th anniversary. Now, what kind of responsibility think tanks have in China and elsewhere, particularly in the U.S., about making sure it's not going to be a future of wars, but rather still a future of peace and balance?
So as Chinese think tanks, I think number one, we should, also keep the pace of the time. And secondly, to serve, number one is to serve the Chinese policy-making circle, because the think tanks combined with those thinkers. If thinkers cannot think some good ideas, you cannot blame the government to don't have any good policy. So this is our new mission and a new task. And then I think how to shape the public opinion and mass media rather than kidnapped by public opinion. This is also the mission. And the last but not least is that the international communications. Given the reason that the official dialogues channels didn't work well, and it's more necessary that the think tanks play the track 2, track 1.5 channel to play some kind of role. If that works, maybe even the governmental relations looks not that good, but the people to people, military to military, think tank to think tank still working positively, actively, then generally speaking, the bilateral relations still hopeful.